I want to first take this opportunity to wish everybody a wonderful International Women's Day, all the wonderful women who are watching. And I'd really like to thank you for giving me this opportunity, Shivani, to host this session.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And just one more thing. So, yes, testing all the inquiries we received few days back when we started promoting Chitraji. Yes, Chitraji is the face and voice behind our initiative, Chanting with Chitra, since we are doing it since 2017. Yes.
Shall we begin, Shivani?
Yes, Chitraji, the session is all yours.
I request everybody to close their eyes and join their palms. I'll begin with a couple of prayers to Acharya Krishnamacharya and Acharya Deshikachar. And then after that, I will chant two or three traditional prayers to Maharshi Patanjali. So close your eyes, join your palms. Think of your teachers, your gurus. Let's salute the Guru Parampara. Om Gurubhyastadgurubhyascha Namo Vakamadhimahe Vrinimahe cha tatradyau Dampati Jagatampati Shri Krishna Vagishayatishwarabhyam Samprapta Chakrankana Bhashyasaram Shri Nutnarangendra Yatau Samarpitasvam Shri Krishna Maryam Guru Varyamide Virodhe Kartike Mase Shatatara Kritodayam Yogacharyam Krishna Maryam Guru Varyamaham Bhaje Shishyakam Krishna Maryasya Nathavam Shapradipakam Kalyana Gunarupantam Shri Deshikan Namamyaham Prashanta Purushakaram Viniyoga Pracharakam Vishesha Vaidikam Surim Tandeshikan Smaramyaham Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Yastyaktvā rūpamadyam prabhavati jagataha anekadha anugrahaya prakshina klesharashihi vishama vishadharaha anekavaktra subhogi Sarvajnana prasutihi bhujaga parikaraha pritaye yasya nityam devo hishaha savo vyat sita vimalatanuhu yogado yogayuktaha yogena chit Tasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarottam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi abahu purushakaram shankha chakrasidharinam sahasrashirasam shvetam pranamami patanjalim Shrimate Anantaya Nagarajaya Namo Namaha. I'd like to share my screen now. So please let me know if you can see this.
Yes, ma'am, we can see it.
Okay. Yeah, since I am from the tradition of the legendary Krishnamacharya and Acharya Deshikachar, I would like to start the session by honoring them and for their teachings. So first, I would like to talk about Tirumalai Krishnamacharya. He was probably one of the most influential teachers of the 20th century. He lived a glorious life of about 101 years. And today, especially, I would like to honor him because he was one of the first, probably the first to teach yoga and chanting to women. Because he felt that women required yoga because they give birth to children. And, he started teaching his wife, his daughters. And in fact, one of his very first foreign students was a woman. Her name was Indira Devi. She went on to, be a teacher of substance of her own. So Acharya Krishnamacharya was basically a scholar of all the philosophies. And what I would like to emphasize about his life is that he popularized the holistic practice of yoga. It was not just about practicing the physical aspect. It was not about just practicing asana. Many of us have seen videos of him practicing really difficult postures, but it was not really about only that. He also taught whoever went to him to learn, any of his students, he also taught the scriptures. He taught chanting. He taught many of the subtle tools of yoga. So it was never just about asana. And I think, especially in the modern world where there's a lot of emphasis only on the physical practice, I think we need to look towards the guidance of Acharya Krishnamacharya, to learn the scriptural knowledge, which is very, very important. Okay. And he also popularized the term Vini Yoga. So Vini Yoga is a term that we hear a lot today. And basically what that means is that you adapt the practice to the student. So there is a very famous quote by Acharya Krishnamacharya which says, "Teach what is within you, not as it applies to you, but as it applies to the one in front of you." So it was all about adapting the practice to the student because it is about honoring each student's individuality. And he felt that each student was different. He accepted that each student was different. So with all the tools that he had to share, he honored each student by teaching the tools that was most appropriate to that student at that particular time of his or her life. So it was all about adapting the practice to the individual. Okay, so I would like to talk a little bit about his son TKV Deshikachar. And he was basically, a yoga therapist par excellence. And he, took a lot of effort to spread his father's teachings. He spent 30 years with his father studying and learning the scriptures. In fact, he in one of his books, he says that he went through the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali with his father during those 30 years 7 times. And each time he found something new. He found something deeper. And basically what he said was that yoga is kind of like a relationship. It's a relationship that you have with yourself. It's a relationship that you have with the rest of this world based on the relationship that you have with yourself. That's why his reference book is called Heart of Yoga, and it is cherished as a reference book by yoga students worldwide. And Acharya Deshikachar, if you have seen any of the workshops from our tradition, we use stick figures to explain postures. So he was the one who basically invented stick figures to represent asanam, so that was easier to teach workshops. It was easier to represent asanams while teaching students. Okay, so in the modern world, we see that asanams are mostly associated with yoga. So it's more of a, superficial approach. There's a lack of holistic approach, and there is a lack of scriptural knowledge. So what is happening is that yoga is moving away from the ancient wisdom. So because of that, there is a lot of misuse of the tools of yoga. And there is something very beautiful about these ancient scriptures, about this ancient knowledge that we have. So it is important that we preserve this ancient knowledge and we transmit this knowledge the way it needs to be transmitted. So subtle concepts like prana, subtle concepts like mudras, subtle concepts like bandhas, subtle concepts like the breath are being ignored in the modern times. So basically what we need to do is bring yoga back to the scriptural knowledge. And this is something that I'm very, very passionate about, because I feel that to be a teacher of substance, to be a practitioner of substance, we need to go back to scriptural knowledge so that we can be guided by the wisdom of the scriptures. And if we go with scriptural knowledge, we can never go wrong. So this is basically, one of the things that we get from these great masters. And if these great masters like Acharya Deshikacharya, if he can spend 30 years of his life with his teacher, with his father, studying the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, we need to spend, as much time as we possibly can trying to understand the depth of knowledge that, these scriptures offer us. Okay, so I just want to talk about what exactly yoga is. So yoga is basically a philosophy. So it is one of the Astika Darshanams, Astika Darshanani. So there are 6 Astika Darshananis which accept the authority of the Vedas. Okay, so there are Astika, there are Nastika Darshanas as well. But the Astika Darshananis are those which accept the authority of the Vedas. And there are Nastika Darshananis which reject the testimony of the Vedas. Okay, so yoga is one of the Astika Darshananis. So it is a philosophy. It is a way of life. It is not just about physical postures. Okay, so what are the Vedas? We all know what the Vedas are. They are a huge body of scriptural knowledge that evolved over time. So the Vedas are called Shruti. Okay, and the word Veda is basically derived from the Sanskrit word Vid, the root word Vid, which basically means to know. So Vedas evolved over time, and they are considered to be apaurushaya, which means that it is not man-made, it came to us directly from the divine. So Vedas are Ananta, Vedas are Anadi. They are beginningless, they are endless, they are limitless. Okay, so we all know that there are 4 Vedas which were classified by Vedavyasa: Rig Vedaha, Sama Vedaha, Yajur Vedaha, and Atharva Vedaha. So basically, what I want to repeat once again is that yoga is a philosophy that is based on the knowledge of the Vedas. Okay, so it is an Astika Darshanam. Okay, so the Shad Darshanani, the 6 Astika systems of Indian philosophy are Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Yoga, Sankhya, Purva Mimamsa, and Vedanta. Okay, so basically Yoga and Sankhya are very close. They are considered to be sister philosophies because their philosophical basis is the same. Nyaya and Vaisheshika are considered to be sister philosophies, and Purva Mimamsa and Vedanta are considered to be sister philosophies. Okay, so the Astika Darshanas, what is the purpose of these philosophies which are based on the Vedas? The purpose of these philosophies which are based on the Vedas is to end suffering. Okay, all of these philosophies propose that human existence is suffering, and they show the way, the means to liberation. Basically, they show the means to lasting permanent happiness. So basically what they are trying to tell us is any kind of happiness that we may get in this life is temporary. So basically what these philosophies promise is that you can gain lasting permanent happiness, and this happiness is possible for each and every one of us. So the means might be different in each one of these shastras. Sankhya has a different approach, yoga has a different approach. For example, Sankhya has a more theoretical approach for us to basically move towards this lasting permanent happiness, and yoga has a more practical approach. It has more of a meditative approach to reach this goal of permanent lasting happiness, which is basically called Kaivalyam in yoga and Sankhya. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about Sankhya because, it is important for us to understand what is the background of yoga philosophy. So basically, the tools of yoga are, based upon the metaphysical structure that Sankhya provides. Okay, so Sankhya was founded by Maharshi Kapila. So each of these philosophies has a particular rishi who was the original seer. So for Sankhya philosophy, it is Kapila. And as I told you, Sankhya philosophy proposes that human existence is suffering, which is basically what all these philosophies propose. And basically what it does is that it provides theoretical solutions to lasting happiness. And it is very important for us to understand that Sankhya proposes that the world is consisting of two metaphysical realities. So it is a dualistic philosophy, and those two metaphysical realities are Prakriti and Purusha, basically. So the entire world, including us, is consistent of these two metaphysical realities. And there is one core text that is surviving of Sankhya philosophy, which is basically Sankhya Karika by Ishvara Krishna. So if any of you are interested, I would strongly urge, practitioners and teachers of yoga to go through this text and understand the basis of Sankhya philosophy so that you can enhance your knowledge of yoga philosophy. It is extremely useful to study Sankhya philosophy if you are in the realm of yoga philosophy. Okay, so basically what is yoga philosophy? Yoga philosophy is basically referred to as Sa Ishvara Sankhya. Okay, so it is called Seshvara Sankhya, which basically means that along with the two metaphysical realities that are proposed by Sankhya, yoga has another entity called Ishvara, who is introduced by Patanjali Maharishi, who is the original seer of yoga philosophy. Okay, so there is Prakriti and Purusha, and there is Ishvara. So, and he calls Prakriti and Purusha Drashta and Drishyam, and we'll come to that when I explain further about yoga philosophy. Okay, so basically what yoga provides is practical meditative tools, and for us to get to the state of Kaivalyam, basically get to the state of Viveka Khyati, which is basically one step before the final goal of Kaivalyam. Okay, so most of the tools of yoga are accepted by other philosophies. The meditative tools of yoga are considered to be extremely practical, and they are accepted by most of the other philosophies. And basically what we need to understand is that this is a very personal and this is a very spiritual path. And this is basically unique to each and every one of us, because each one of us is different, as proposed by Acharya Krishnamacharya. We all need to figure out and understand, like, what is the path for me individually. But whatever the tools that I use, for me, it is possible to get to the state of the final state of Kaivalyam. In the modern world, we may think, what does Kaivalyam have to do with me? But according to Vedic tradition, all of us are moving towards this final goal. If any of you are familiar with, the Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. So basically, what our Vedic tradition says is that once we come within the moral framework of, maybe accumulating money or, indulging in sensory pleasures, all the temporary happinesses that this world offers within the framework of morality. And when that happens, basically what these Vedic traditions say is that invariably you will start asking the fundamental questions of life. So all of us are moving towards that final state of permanent, lasting happiness only. Whether we understand it in this life or whether we understand it or not, we are moving towards that. And this, final goal may take several lifetimes. It may take a few lifetimes, or there are some people like, say, Adi Shankaracharya, who already came into this life already very evolved, very spiritually evolved. And this was probably the last life for him to get to that state of permanent happiness. Okay, so basically, as Acharya Krishnamacharya says, like, because he had scriptural knowledge, he was very, very clear that this is a very, very individual path. And, this is possible for each and every one of us. And it only depends on the effort that we put into this. Each and everybody, depending on their own individual effort, will progress on this spiritual path. Okay. So the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali basically are the core compilation of this philosophy. So all of these philosophies have a core text, and all of them are in sutra style. So we have the Brahma Sutras for the Vedanta philosophy. We have Yoga Sutras for yoga philosophy. We have Sankhya Sutras for, Sankhya philosophy. So each of these philosophies has, a core text which is in sutra style. So Patanjali's Yoga Sutras is basically the core text of this philosophy, and it contains 195 sutrani. So sutram is, singular, and sutrani is plural. So it has 195 sutrani, and the entire philosophy of yoga is explained so beautifully by Maharshi Patanjali in, just in 195 sutrani. So who was Patanjali? So just, to take a moment to talk about Patanjali, he was considered to be an incarnation of Adisesha, the couch, the serpent couch, resting couch of Mahavishnu. And he is referred to as Sutrakaraha. So basically anybody who presents a text in sutra style is called a Sutrakaraha. And he is also referred to as a Bhashyakaraha. So Bhashyakaraha because he, basically also wrote a bhashyam or a commentary on Panini's Ashtadhyayi. So he's also called a Bhashyakaraha. So basically it is said that Patanjali, authored 3 works for purification. So basically, what are all these spiritual practices trying to do? Basically, they are trying to help us to purify the mind, body, the speech, basically so that we can move forward in our spiritual path. So Patanjali is supposed to have authored 3 works for purification. So the traditional chant that I did in the beginning of this session, Yogena Chittasya Padena Vacham. So that is basically a traditional chant that, talks about him authoring these 3 works for purification. So he gave us yoga for the mind, and he gave us through the Yoga Sutras, and he gave us, grammar for the speech, basically by authoring the Bhashyam of Panini's Ashtadhyayi. And there is also supposed to have been a book on Ayurveda that he authored, which is lost. So at all 3 levels, he offered us knowledge to purify ourselves so that we can move forward on our spiritual path. And I also want to emphasize that he was not the inventor of yoga. Basically what he did was he systematized and he codified existing traditions. So you will find a mention of yoga in texts, that precede the Yoga Sutra. Like in the Upanishads, in the Bhagavad Gita, you will find definitions of yoga. So just to emphasize once again that he is not the inventor of yoga. He is the one who codified all the existing practices of yoga, and he presented it to us in a very beautiful and concise and precise form through the Yoga Sutras of 195 Sutrani. Okay, so this is basically the chant that I chanted in the beginning. Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopa karottam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi abahu purushakaram shankha chakrasi dharinam sahasra shirasam shvetam pranamami patanjalim srimate anantaya nagarajaya namo namaha. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about the structure of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. So as I told you, it is presented in a sutra style, and basically sutram basically means thread or string. So as you study the Sutrani, you will understand that each sutram connects very beautifully to the next one. So there is a common thread that moves through the Sutrani, tying the philosophy very beautifully together. And it is an amazing example of knowledge compression. Very in a very few number of words, an enormous amount of knowledge is transmitted. And why were these Sutrani composed in the manner that they were composed? Because in the olden days, in the Vedic tradition, a lot of knowledge was transmitted orally. So when knowledge was in the form of Sutrani, it was easy to memorize, it was easy to chant, and it was easy for teachers to transmit. So it was mostly chanted and transmitted, and students learned most of the knowledge through oral transmission. Okay, and there are 4 chapters or padas. So each chapter is called a padaha. So we have Samadhi padaha, we have Sadhana padaha, Vibhuti padaha, and Kaivalya padaha. And the first commentary on the Yoga Sutrani was given to us by Vyasa. We don't know if this is the same Vyasa who authored the Mahabharata, but the first commentary was, given to us by somebody called Vyasa. And the reason why we have several commentaries on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali is because it is very difficult for a student to understand the Sutrani on their own. You require the guidance of bhashyams, you require the guidance of teachers, so that you are able to understand the wealth of knowledge that lies beneath, the compressed knowledge of each sutram. So it is very important that the student take the guidance of teachers to understand each and every sutram very carefully. Okay, so I want to just talk about what is contained in the Samadhi Padaha and what is contained in the Sadhana Padaha for the purpose of this presentation. And Samadhi Padaha is basically the chapter on concentration. So Samadhi is the last but final goal. The final goal is Kaivalyam, but Samadhi is the penultimate goal of the practice. And basically what Acharya Krishnamacharya used to say is that this particular chapter is directed towards students who are already quite evolved on their spiritual path, who are much further forward in their spiritual path. And basically those are called Samahita Chitta. So they are already quite balanced. So you will find that in the first chapter, a lot of tools that are presented are, more meditative. So basically the student should have already had a reasonable practice to be able to, use these subtle tools to move towards the final goal. Okay, and Sadhana Padaha, which is the chapter on practice, is a little bit more action oriented. So it is directed towards people in the modern world. It is basically for vyuthita chittas or vikshepa chittas. So people whose minds are a little bit more distracted, a little bit more scattered, but those who are serious about the spiritual path. So this chapter is basically directed towards those kind of aspirants. Okay, and it provides tools for holistic living, and it starts with Kriya Yoga. So, there is a lot of similarity between the Bhagavad Gita and, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, in the sense that in the Sadhana Pada, where Patanjali is encouraging us to begin on a more action-oriented path, similarly, Lord Krishna encouraged Arjuna to follow the path of Karma Yoga, which was basically going to lead him towards that knowledge and then lead him towards the final goal of moksha. So there is a lot of similarity between these two scriptures in that aspect, especially in the Sadhana Padaha. So what is Kriya Yoga? So this chapter, Sadhana Padaha, starts with Kriya Yoga, and it's basically a spiritual start. And this is basically the basis for Ashtanga Yoga of Patanjali, which will be presented in the second chapter. And it is basically about bringing more sattva guna into the mind, into the system. And it is about empowering yourself to move forward on this spiritual path. Okay, so we will come to the Sadhana Padaha. I'm going to try and see if I can, cover as much as possible in the time that I have. So in the first chapter, the first 4 sutrani are referred to as the Chatus Sutri. Okay, and basically what the first 4 sutras do is that they convey the essence of the entire text. So basically the rest of the text you can think of as being details or elaborations of these 4 sutrani. Okay, so the goal is presented first. Okay, so the very first sutram in Samadhi Padaha is Atha Yoganushāsanam. So there is a way to chant. I won't be chanting the sutrani here, but there is a way to chant these sutrams which need to be, learned from a teacher. Okay, and the first word in that is Atha. And this sutram is basically referred to as the Pratignya Sutram because Atha basically, represents a promise or a commitment to learning, this scripture, to learning about the philosophy of yoga. So it is basically a divine promise, and Atha Yoganushāsanam. So basically, Yogasya Anushasanam is basically what this compound word means. And Anushasanam basically indicates a traditional system of learning. I think just this one sutram is enough for us to understand that this is a system, this is a philosophy that needs to be, dealt with very seriously. If you want to be in the realm of yoga philosophy, you need to learn the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. You need to understand the knowledge that Patanjali is presenting us. So Anushasanam is basically a traditional system of learning that has to be followed. And this is not something that you can learn on your own. This is something that needs to be learned under the guidance of a teacher. So the very first sutram basically, directs us in the right path, on the right path. So if we are, embarking on a path, we need to know where to go. So basically what this sutram does is it directs us on that path. So this sutram is called Pratignya Sutram. Okay, the second sutram is Yogaha Chitta Vritti Nirodhaha. And you can also chant this as Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodhaha. You may have heard it being chanted like that. And that is basically because of the rules of Sandhi in Sanskritam. So this basically is called the Lakshana Sutra. And basically what this offers is the definition of the state of yoga according to Maharshi Patanjali. And I need to emphasize this because there are several definitions of yoga in other scriptures. Like, for example, in one of the previous sessions, Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. was stated from the Bhagavad Gita. Yoga karmasu kaushalam. These are other definitions of yoga. So yoga chitta vritti nirodha is basically Patanjali's definition of yoga. So yoga is derived from the root word yuch. Okay, and basically what that means is that we are trying to bring the mind into a state of stillness, So basically the other words in the sutram, what they mean is chitta is the mental faculty, and vritti is basically the activity of the mind. So basically vritti indicates the movements of the mind. And there will be 5 types that will be classified in the text. And nirodha is the most refined focused state of mind, where sattva maximizes. I will talk about what sattva is. It's basically one of the gunas that are there in Prakriti. Okay, so basically this is about bringing this mind to a state of stillness so that we can see with clarity. Basically that's what it means. Okay. And just to kind of, talk about the 5 states of mind from Vyasa's commentary so that we can put the state of Nirodha in perspective. So Vyasa says that the mind can be in 5 states. Okay, so basically there are, Kshipta, which is a very, very distracted mind, Mudha, which is a very dull mind, Vikshipta, which is a partially focused mind, Ekagrata, which is a one-pointed mind, which is moving towards the state of yoga, and Nirodha is basically the final and fully absorbed mind, which is in a very, very highly refined state. Okay, and that is the state of mind that we are trying to get to through the practice of yoga. Okay, so this is basically something that I want to emphasize here, is that, yoga is about the mind. And the mind is a very, very subtle aspect of who we are. And all of the tools of yoga are basically for this purpose. If you are practicing an asanam, it is for the purpose of refining and purifying the mind. If you are practicing pranayama, it is basically for the purpose of refining and purifying the mind. So this requires a very, very systematic approach, which Patanjali will offer us. Because it is very difficult to, reach the subtle realms of the mind, to purify the mind to such an extent that we are able to see with clarity. So this requires a step-by-step approach, which Patanjali will offer us very beautifully in this text. And the third sutram of Chatussutri is basically Tada Drashtuhu Swarupe Avasthanam. And this sutram is called the Swarupa Sutram, which basically describes the final state of Kaivalyam. Okay, and this is basically a consequence of the yogic state. So yogaha chitta vritti nirodhaha and tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. So tada means at that time. So at that time, what happens? The Purusha, or it's called Atma or Chit or Spirit or Sakshi, whatever you want to know it as. Basically, the Purusha abides in its own essence, which is pure consciousness or pure awareness. So basically, this describes the state of Kaivalyam. Okay. And the 4th sutram in Chatussutri is Vritti Sarupyam Itaratra. So basically what this is talking about is the non-yogic state. So when we are not in the yogic state, basically what we are doing is we are being continuously drawn away from that divinity within, and there is a lot of increase in vritti. So basically when we say yogaha chitta vritti nirodhaha, basically what we're trying to do is we are trying to reduce the vrittis, we are trying to purify the mind of the vrittis, and we are trying to come to that state of stillness. So in the state of vritti sarupyam itaratra, basically what we are saying is that we are moving away from that state of clarity, we are moving away from that state of stillness. Okay, and this is considered to be a state of avidya and basically dukkham, which basically means suffering. Okay, so the chitta is in the state of kshipta, mudha or vikshipta. Okay. So as I told you in the beginning, Patanjali will define the vrittis of the mind. So the vrittis of the mind or the activities of the mind can be either klishta or aklishta. So basically, it can lead us towards suffering, or it can lead us towards tranquility. So, as a step, each thought, each emotion, each action, everything is counted as a vritti. So it can either be detrimental or it can be non-detrimental. Okay. And the vrittis are classified as pramana, which is right knowledge, viparyaya, which is erroneous knowledge, vikalpa, which is imagination, and basically nidra, which is deep sleep, and memory, which is smriti. Okay, so basically all of the vrittis, all of the thoughts, all of the emotions, all of them can be classified in these under these 5 headings. Okay, so basically what we are trying to do is reduce the vrittis of the mind. And how do we get to the state of Nirodha? So there is a very, very brilliant sutram in the first chapter, the 12th chapter of the Samadhi Padaha, where Patanjali says, Abhyasa Vairagyabhyam Tan Nirodha. So Tan Nirodha basically means to that state of Nirodha. There is a 2-point formula to get to that state of Nirodha. And what are the 2 parts? Abhyasaha and Vairagyam. So abhyasaha basically means practice, and he will elaborate it further in the 13th and the 14th sutra. And why does he elaborate? Because the practice that we are engaging in needs to be correct. The practice that we are engaging in needs to be appropriate, for us. It needs to be uninterrupted practice. It needs to have the right attitude. It needs to be sustained practice. So he will say that abhyasaha needs to be long. It needs to be uninterrupted. This is one of my favorite sutrams in the first chapter, because the sutram ends with the word dridha bhumihi, basically, which means firm foundation. So to get to that state of Nirodha, we need to have a practice that is long-term, that is sustained, which is correct. And basically that practice needs to be supported by Vairagyam. Okay, so Abhyasaha and Vairagyam, they support and verify each other. And what is Vairagyam? Vairagyam is basically about detaching or renouncing everything that takes you away from your practice. So it is basically mastery or control over your senses, because the mind can just run amok and it can take you away from the practice. So basically it is about sustaining this balance between these 2 beautiful aspects, so that we can move forward on our spiritual path and we can move towards the state of Nirodha, which is basically the yogic state, which will take us towards Kaivalya. Okay. And, there is a very important aspect that is, presented by Patanjali in the first chapter, which is basically the concept of Shraddha. It is, Acharya Deshikacharya used to say that, it is not even possible to embark on this path without, having some kind of Shraddha. Shraddha is very important. And the spiritual path starts with the concept of Shraddha. And, it is about, bringing the tools of yoga alive, which Shraddha is what Acharya used to say. And Shraddha is basically Bhakti Visheshaha. If we want to, engage in this path, we need to have faith in the teacher. We need to have faith in the teachings. We need to have faith in the scriptures. So if we embark on this path with doubt in our mind, then this path is not for you. So basically what Shraddha does, it is that it empowers your practice. It brings that element of devotion into the practice, so that it is not mechanical. It needs to come from your heart. If you are chanting a mantra, it needs to come from the heart, not just from the lips. If you are practicing an asanam, it needs to come from your heart, not just from your physical body. So each of these tools needs to be respected, and there are various degrees of Shraddha that are indicated by Patanjali in the first chapter. And basically what he indicates is that however intense your Shraddha is, the goal is that much closer. So the more intense your Shraddha, the closer the goal. It is entirely up to you. You know, how hard you want to work on this path, you know, how far you want to go in this life is entirely up to you, and it needs to be filled with Shraddha. It needs to be filled with this, beautiful aspect of bhakti that Shraddha indicates. You know, and there is another thing that I quickly want to say here, that Patanjali introduces Ishvara in the 23rd sutram of the first chapter in Samadhi Padaha, and devotion to Ishvara pranidhanatva is what he will say, and he presents it as an option. And he presents it as an option that will directly take us to the state of Chitta Vritti Nirodha. And what is so beautiful about the Yoga Sutras is that Ishvara is presented as a supreme teacher. Ishvara is not presented as a creator as in other philosophies, or a destroyer or a preserver. Ishvara is presented as a Purusha Visheshaha. So Ishvara is presented as a supreme teacher, and Ishvara is presented as the source of all knowledge. And he also says that if we want to connect with Ishvara, how do we do that? He says that Ishvara is designated by Om, the Pranava mantra. So repetition of the Pranava mantra with bhavana, with Shraddha, as we just spoke about, is basically what results in all your obstacles disappearing, and it moves you closer to the divinity within. So the very first tool that is offered by Patanjali in the first chapter is basically japa. He actually uses the word japa when he talks about, Ishvara and the concept of Ishvara. So over here it is presented as an option, because he says Ishvara pranidhanat va. Va basically means, an option. And then he presents several tools after this, but this is the first tool that is presented. But interestingly, in the second chapter, he also talks about Ishvara Pranidhanam. And if you remember, I told you that the second chapter is basically for, for those individuals who are just starting out on the spiritual path, who are looking for a more action-oriented, path. In that chapter, he does not present Ishvara Pranidhanam as an option. He presents it as a part of Kriya Yoga, and he presents it as a part of the Niyamaha as well, which I will come to. Okay. So there are other options to attain Samadhi besides Ishvara Pranidhanam, which are presented in the first chapter. And as I said, the first chapter is directed towards people who are more evolved in their spiritual path. So most of the tools are subtle tools, like, for example, focus on the exhale, the hold after the hold after the exhale, focus on the light in your heart, meditate on any object. So many of the tools are, basically very meditative in the first chapter. Okay, so the second chapter, as I told you, is a more action-oriented chapter. And this is the chapter in which he presents the Ashtanga Yoga. So we hear this word Ashtanga, and we will try to understand what Ashtanga means in the scripture, of Patanjali. So the very first, method that Patanjali presents is Kriya Yoga. So basically, Kriya means action. In a lot of our regional languages as well, we have this word. So Kriya is basically a path of action. So he presents a threefold path of action. Okay. And what are the three parts? The first part is tapaha. The second part is swadhyaya. And the third part is Ishvara Pranidhanam. Okay, so it is there in Kriya Yoga as well, Ishvara Pranidhanam, and it is there in Ashtanga Yoga as well. So what is tapaha? Basically, tapaha is, engaging in any kind of discipline, austerities, and avoiding misuse of the senses. Bringing the senses to some kind of discipline and not allowing them to run amok, and drawing in, the senses and following, a life of discipline. That is, a spiritual start. This is very important for a spiritual start, tapaha. Swadhyaya basically is knowledge of the scriptures, and Swadhyaya can be, translated as Swa Adhyaya. So basically self-knowledge, which will come through the study of the scriptures. Okay. And interestingly, Vyasa also says Japa is an aspect of Swadhyaya. So chanting scriptures is also considered to be an aspect of Swadhyaya. Because it leads you, to knowledge of yourself. And Ishvara Pranidhanam in this chapter is a more, action-oriented path where you dedicate all of your actions to Ishvara. Okay, so basically what Patanjali says is that as a result of Kriya Yoga, you will start moving towards Samadhi. He doesn't say that you will get Samadhi or you will get to the state of Samadhi. Basically what he says is that you will start moving in the direction of Samadhi, which basically means that we are moving forward on a spiritual path, and that you will start to reduce or weaken the kleshaha or the impurities of the mind. Basically it is about reducing the impurities of the mind, and the kleshas are 5 in number. So he introduces a concept and then he will elaborate. And the pancha kleshaha are avidya, asmita, ragaha, dveshaha, and abhiniveshaha. So basically what he says after that, after he introduces the 5 kleshaha, is that avidya is the breeding ground for all the other kleshas. So in yoga and Sankhya, the fundamental avidya is basically the confusion between Purusha and Prakriti. So basically it is wrong knowledge. It is not lack of knowledge. It is basically wrong knowledge. And this is considered to be the ultimate cause for samsara. And it is dispelled by right knowledge. Okay. And he will present the kleshaha in 5 states. And as you can imagine, if the impurities are present in the mind, and the mind being such a subtle aspect of who we are, rooting out the kleshas requires a very, very microscopic approach. And this is not an easy path. This is a very, very difficult path. It requires a very, very step-by-step methodical approach to purification of the mind. Okay. And then from, I think it's about the 16th sutram in the 2nd chapter, he presents what is called the Chaturvyuha model. And basically from this point on, the path to end suffering is presented here. And there are 4 significant sutrani which basically offer these 4 steps. And then the rest of it is basically the rest of the sutrani in this chapter and, the chapters that are to come basically fit around this model. So basically, as I told you in the beginning, what we need to end is suffering. So the very first sutram 2.16 says, Heyam Dukkham Anagatam. So basically what the sutram is telling us is that, we can't do anything about past suffering. And we can't do anything about suffering that has already manifested because of the law of karma. In fact, Patanjali talks about the law of karma before he presents this, because just to emphasize that we already have karma that we are carrying. But we can be prepared for, the dukkham that is yet to come. So we can be proactive. Basically, that's what this sutram says. And hetuhu, the cause of that dukkham, is basically drashtra drishyayoho samyogaha heya hetuhu. So basically, this confusion between Purusha and Prakriti, which is avidya, is basically the cause for the samyogaha. And then Hanam is basically Kaivalyam, which is basically the goal that we are trying to get towards. And the Upayaha, or the means that are presented by Patanjali so beautifully in this chapter, is basically the Ashtanga Yoga, or the 8 limbs. So by the time he presents the 8 limbs in the 2nd chapter, it is already the 28th sutram. So you can imagine how important the background or the context is before we actually use the tools of yoga as presented by Patanjali. And this is very significant in the way the tools are being used in the modern world. Okay, just quickly to, explain what is Drishyam, which is basically another term for Prakriti. Drishyam is basically what is being seen by the Drashta. So what is being seen, which is basically the object of perception, which includes our mind, body, senses, and the rest of the world. and that's why it is called Drishyam, because it is basically what is being seen. But what makes it very challenging for us on this path is that the Prakriti is consists of the gunas. So the gunas are constantly changing. So basically what we need to do is bring Prakriti also to a state of stillness so that it can assist the Purusha on its spiritual path. So Prakriti is considered to be basically a medium, a spiritual medium, a spiritual instrument for Purusha to move towards its ultimate purpose. So we need to understand that since this is a divine instrument, we need to avoid misuse of this beautiful instrument that we've been given. So we need to use this instrument appropriately. This is a spiritual path. This is not a materialistic path. We are not here to celebrate Prakriti. We are not here to celebrate the body. We are not here to celebrate matter. We are here to basically move forward on a spiritual path. And that, according to the scripture, is the only purpose of the Prakriti. Okay. And the Purusha, or as Patanjali calls it, Drashta, is basically the seer, the subject, the witness, you can call it Atma, the soul, the perceiver. Basically what Purusha is doing is witnessing this whole dance of Prakriti. And Purusha does not have gunas, so it is not changing, but it basically requires Prakriti to perceive. Okay, so you can think about Prakriti as being the divine instrument of Purusha. Okay, so the context is established, and from the 28th sutram of the second chapter, Patanjali presents Ashtanga Yoga. And he says, this is one of my favorite sutrams in the second chapter. He says, Yoganganushthanat Ashuddhikshaye Jnana Deeptihi Aviveka Khyatehe. So basically, Ashta Anga. So basically, there are 8 limbs that are presented by Patanjali, and he says that they need to be carefully utilized. It is we need to utilize these limbs very carefully. We should not misuse these tools, and it indicates like a Guru Parampara. There is a tradition behind all this. It is not something that we can just take out of context and misuse. So it's a very, very important thing to have Shraddha on this path and to understand the tools as they are presented by Patanjali. Okay, so no limb should be practiced in isolation. Every limb is basically a basis for the next one. So yoga is referred to as Sarvanga Sadhana. So it's a holistic practice. Okay, so Ashtanga Yoga of Patanjali has Bahiranga sadhanas, which are Yamaha, Niyamaha, Asanam, Pranayamaha, and Pratyahara. And the subtle limbs or the internal limbs, Dharana, Dhyanam, and Samadhi. Okay, so Yamaha and Niyamaha are presented by Patanjali first because they are the foundation of the other angas. And 15 sutrani are dedicated by Patanjali for the Yamaha and the Niyamaha. So they are basically about cleansing, they are about, reducing distractions, they're about purifying the mind and continuous introspection or reflection on all 3 levels, mind, body, and speech. Okay, and the final goal of this is, of course, Viveka Khyati, but there are some intermediate goals that are presented by Patanjali. So the Yamaha are basically the relationship with the external world. So Ahimsa, Satyam, and so forth. And it requires a great effort. So basically constantly reflecting, constantly correcting our habits. And this is a prerequisite for Niyamaha. So basically, what are the Niyamaha? They are personal observances. It is about reducing internal distractions, and they are Shaucha, Santosha, and so forth. Okay, so basically, even if the external world, if there are no distractions in the external world, basically when we look inwards, there are enough distractions in the mind. So this is basically about my, relationship with myself. Okay, so this also requires a great amount of engagement from the individual. Okay, I'm going to move forward to the third anga, which is basically asanam, because I realize that I'm running out of time. But I just want to quickly say that asanam is the third anga of the Ashtanga, and basically it comes from the root word as, which basically means to be seated. So you can imagine that by the time we get to this point, and he will present the traditional viewpoint of asanam is thiram and sukham. And this was preceded by Yamaha and Niyamaha, which gives us a clue that that needs to be in place before we can come to this firm, stable, and balanced seated pose, which is basically what is required for the subtle angas that are to follow. Dharana, Dhyanam, Samadhi, Pratyahara comes before that. For us to be able to move forward on our spiritual path and engage with these other angas, we need to have a firm and balanced pose. Okay, so asanam is presented as a traditional seated pose by Patanjali. So basically all the other asanams that we are practicing in the modern world is basically for us to be able to get to this, firm, comfortable, stable seated pose. Okay, in the modern world, this is the most visible part of yoga. It has become extremely commercial and it is often equated to the whole practice of yoga. And all the subtle tools of yoga are ignored. What the fact that yoga is a spiritual path is ignored, and this caters to a young and flexible body image. And some people come to yoga for this, but this may lead them to the other angas. But many times people practice this out of context, and it ends up in basically injury and a lot of suffering, and we are trying to reduce suffering. So basically the definition of Patanjali is Sthira Sukham Asanam, which is the 46th sutram in the second chapter, which basically Sthiram is basically stability, firmness, and steadiness, and Sukham is comfort, ease, and pleasantness. And this basically needs to permeate all the aspects of the practitioner. And basically the mind, the body, and the breath, they all need to come to the state of Sthiram and Sukham, so that we are able to move to the next anga, which is Pranayama. So I'll just quickly tell you that Yamaha and Niyamaha basically prepare the body and mind. Asanam prepares the body and the mind, leading to a state of mental equilibrium, so that we are able to sit in this comfortable seat and then consciously regulate the inhale, the exhale, and the retention. Okay, so that we can focus on the practice of pranayama. And pranayama is about bringing the breath to that state of subtleness, to that state of smoothness, so that we are not distracted by the mind. So basically the mind and the breath are intimately connected. So we are trying to make the breath more and more subtle, more and more refined, so that we are able to focus on the antaranga sadhanas that are to follow. So it is not possible for somebody to engage in practices like dharana, dhyanam, and samadhi without these angas that form a foundation for that. So each anga is the basis for the next anga, and each anga beautifully lays a foundation for the next anga. So I'll just come to, Shivani, I know that I am out of time. So should I just stop here and just kind of wrap it up?
No, please continue. You can continue. We have another 10 to 15 minutes. Don't worry.
Okay, all right. So that's good. Okay, so basically, so as the breath, so the mind. So basically, what we are trying to do is we are trying to refine the mind so that we are able to focus the mind and bring it to that state of stillness. Otherwise, it is not possible at all. And he presents very beautifully the framework of pranayama in the second chapter. And he says that the end goal of the practice is dirghaha and sukshmaha. So basically, whatever the practice you are, whichever technique of pranayama that you're practicing, like in the Yoga Sutrani, there is no specific technique that is taught by Patanjali, but there are other Hatha Yoga texts which elaborate on different techniques of pranayama. But whatever the technique you practice, the end goal of the practice is dirghaha and sukshmaha. So the components are bahya, abhyantara, and stambha vritti, which basically is the exhale, the inhale, and the retention. And the parameters are desha, kala, and sankhya. So desha is basically where are you directing your awareness, your energy when you're practicing that particular pranayama. Kala is basically the ratio of the inhale, the exhale, and the retention. And sankhya is basically the number of repetitions. So he says that once you gain mastery on pranayama, the light within us will be revealed. So this is a very important and significant sutram, because he says, tataha kshiyate prakashavaranam. Basically, the light within us will be revealed, which basically means that we already have a light, and all we have to do is reveal that light through these practices. So what are we trying to do through these practices? We are trying to purify the mind. We are trying to reduce the vrittis. We are trying to bring the mind to a state of stillness so that we can see with clarity and we can move inwards. If we move outwards, we move towards the world, we are going to be increasing the vrittis, we are going to be increasing our dukkham. Basically, we want to be moving in the opposite direction. Okay. And the next limb that is presented by Patanjali, once we are, we are refined in the anga of pranayama, then we are ready for pratyahara, which is basically about withdrawing the senses. So there is a lot of, emphasis on the withdrawal of the senses in the Bhagavad Gita as well. You'll find that many of these, aspects are presented in the Bhagavad Gita as well. Even Abhyasaha and Vairagyam is presented by Lord Krishna to Arjuna as a means to get to that state of stillness. So pratyahara is basically about bringing the senses, drawing the senses inwards. And then after that, this is the last anga that is presented in the second chapter, the sadhana padaha. And then in the third chapter onwards, he presents the antaranga sadhana. Okay, so basically over there he presents dharana, dhyanam, and samadhi. So dharana is basically about fixing the mind. Desha bandhasya chittasya, desha bandha chittasya dharana is basically the sutram, the first sutram of the third chapter, which is the vibhuti padaha. And it is about binding the mind. It is about tethering the mind to a single place. Okay, and then that will lead or flow into the next aspect of antaranga sadhana, which is basically dhyanam, which is a continuous flow of awareness or unbroken concentration. So dharana flows into dhyanam and then finally flows into that final state of samadhi, which is a state of meditative absorption. Okay, so basically I want to refer back to sutram number 1.12, which was abhyasa vairagya tannirodha. So through all these angas, that needs to be a continuous thread that needs to keep taking us forward. Abhyasaha and vairagyam are the most important aspects of practice. So we need to constantly keep checking in and seeing if we are on the right path. And we need to constantly chant the sutram, is what Acharya Krishnamacharya used to say, atha yoganushāsanam, so that we remember that this is a traditional path, this is a spiritual path, and we need to definitely take the support of the scriptures so that we are not disrespecting the tradition. We need to understand that, this is a glorious tradition that we should not lose in modern times. It should not become a commercial practice. We need to continuously bring yoga back to the roots. So we need to also prevent cultural appropriation that is happening a lot these days. So there is a lot of misuse, and especially asanam practice, needs to be practiced in a philosophical context so that it is not misused and people don't understand the point. They need to understand what is the point and what is the relevance and where does asanam fit into the Ashta Angas, the 8-limb path of Patanjali. And definitely, knowledge of the scriptures offers us a glimpse of the human potential. And, this is a way for us to move forward, end suffering, and understand that permanent and lasting happiness lies in the divinity within only. Okay. And I want to conclude with this quote, which is really a beautiful quote. And basically what this quote is saying, mana eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayoho. So basically what this means is that it is indeed the mind that is the cause for bondage or liberation. So it is up to us and our mind is basically what this quote says. And this is basically from the Amrita Bindu Upanishad, which is one of the yoga Upanishads. Out of the 108 Upanishads, there are some Upanishads which are called Yoga Upanishads, and Amrita Bindu Upanishad is one of them. And basically this quote brings us back so beautifully once again to Yogaha Chitta Vritti Nirodhaha, which basically indicates that it is up to you and your mind which direction you want to go. Okay. So I'll just stop sharing my screen. Yeah, thank you for listening to me. I know I had to go quite fast towards the end because I realized that I was running out of time. But I would urge all serious yoga teachers and yoga practitioners to undertake, study of the scriptures. Without scriptural knowledge, we are going to be moving away from tradition. We are going to lose the depth that, we need to have on this path. It should not become a superficial path. It should continue to remain a spiritual path so that we understand where we need to go. And it is our responsibility as teachers and serious practitioners of yoga to take this forward. Okay, so Shivani, I will just conclude here.
Definitely, Chitraji.
Say a Shanti mantra.
Yeah, sure.
Shanno mitra sham varunah Shanno bhavatvaryama Shanna indro brihaspatihi Shanno vishnururukramaha Namo brahmane Namaste vayo Tvameva pratyaksham brahmasi Tvameva pratyaksham brahma vadishyami Ritam vadishyami Satyam vadishyami Tanmamavatu Tadvaktaramavatu Avatu Mam Avatu Vaktaram Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you and namaste.
Thank you, Chitraji. I think this entire program was soul connecting practice, a guide to the good. But with Chitraji's session, we have got a guide to the good. I think the recording of this session can be treated as a guide which we can look back again and again, because the sutras and the meanings, what Chitraji has shared with us, I think those are the subtle tools to deal with anxiety, to deal with stress, and to be more focused, or I should say, to get that Nirodh Chitta. Isn't it, Chitraji?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we need to put the tools of yoga into perspective. Without that, it becomes, it's very, very superficial. So we need to put them in context. We need to understand the tools, so that each and every one of us can move towards, ultimate happiness.
Precisely. Thank you so much, Chitraji. And thank you everyone for joining us. Once again, happy International Women's Day.
Thank you so much.